Good afternoon everybody, this is HairyMuppet doing another cast. Now up the top right side we have Anoss, who is a diamond player, and down the bottom left we have GeneralGeRaR. I suppose that's the correct way to say it. I could just say general, but he does have the accents there. So we're going to try and say general and probably get laughed at in the comments. Just because we're doing it wrong. Anyway, he's going to be a Zerg player, and I believe he was unranked, but he'll probably be ending up going into Diamond play because I expect this to be a very close game. And yeah, just looking around the map, I'm not sure if we've looked at this map before, but it's got a fairly small expansion area, so there's not much room for you to sort of back your army in. If you're trying to defend this gap here, there's not too much room for your army to actually sit because they get pushed back far enough, and excuse me, they're basically pushed straight on top of the hatchery. So that's not that good. It's got a nice high third over here, which you really can't defend it that well, especially if you break down these rocks. So that's not that good. But anyway, we're going to see how this game turns out, and I've got to say, I live in Australia at the moment, and I've just started uploading videos in the past few days, and I've just said, alright, let's just go for it. Let's just download a ton of videos, do a ton of casts, get some content out there so people can go to my channel and see, wow, he's got a lot of stuff. So I'm not going to say quantity over quality, because I reckon I'm doing a fair job here, but both can't hurt. The reason I'm mentioning this is because I've just discovered, I thought I had a pretty good internet connection, but I've just discovered that my internet is just absolutely abysmal as far as upload goes. I did some rough calculations. I think at the moment I'm probably getting about 100k per second upload speed. Now I do think there's something wrong with my line as well, but even if my internet line was fixed, the most I might get is like 300 or 400, and that's well, if you're in Australia you might think, well, yeah, that's fair enough, that's what we're used to, but we really shouldn't be used to that. We should be able to get something better, and there are better options around, but unfortunately not in my area, which is just not happy about at the moment. But we'll push on, and hopefully I'll be able to average one video a day, upload them during the evening, and maybe just cast a whole lot on the weekend and store them all up. Now if we have a look at the Zerg player, he's got his spawning pool up, he's got his expansion up, so fairly standard play there. He's pushing his drones fairly hard, so he's pushing up the macro. If we go to the units tab, he doesn't have any military units at all. He's busting out some Zerglings though, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a few spine crawlers up here and then just macro like there's no tomorrow. But we'll see if he does that, or if he starts busting out a lot more Zerglings to try and do an attack. He's got speed going, so that may be the route that he's going for. Meanwhile, the Terran player is going for a very defensive option. He's got a bunker there with some Marines already ready to go in it. He's got his very fast expansion going up, and he's also going to be building a factory and a reactor, so we'll almost certainly see the factory dropped onto the reactor and then some fast Hellion harass. And if he gets up 4-6 Hellions, that's going to devastate the Zerg player, because he doesn't have the spine crawlers here. He's got a couple of queens, but the Hellions are so fast and there's so many drones, and the Terran player sees all the drones now, so he knows. It was actually a beautiful scan because he caught 4 more drones being produced there, so he's like, alright, I've hit the jackpot right now. I'll get some Hellions in there and do massive amounts of damage. Somebody's just Skyping me at the moment. Very insistently. So let's I'm very sorry, but I'll have to get back to you after. Bloody oath, that's a third expansion right there. This guy's macroing off the planet. He has got a fair amount of Zerglings though, and he has got speed on them, but unless he has a extremely large amount of Zerglings, they are just not going to cut it against the Hellions. The Hellions will just be able to completely fry the Zerg. And the Zerglings only really have a chance against Hellions when they're on creep, because then they can actually swarm around and take it out. Even with Zergling speed, the Hydras still have a pretty good shot at outmaneuvering the Zerglings. And I was actually wrong here. He's not going for Hellions off the reactor. He's going straight into the tech lab on the barracks. Sorry, on the factory. And he's going for the straight into starport build. So he's going for tanks. Tanks are also a fairly good option versus Zerglings. They're also a fantastic option versus Hydralisks. So if the Zerg decides to go for Roach Hydra, the Terran will be perfectly placed to be able to deal with that. Right now he's got a pretty solid wall in here with a bunker behind it. These look like the custom supply depots for level 20. I thought for a sec there'd been a supply drop, which would have been surprising, but no, they're just the custom skin of the supply depots for level 20 Terran. But I don't think he wants to attack here. I think he mainly wants to just prevent the third base being put down for the Terran player. Now he's got a Spire coming up, so he's going for Mutalisks. I assume Mutalisks, although I did see a... Yeah, no, there's no hive coming down yet. What buildings do we have? We've got Baneling's Nest. There's the Spire. Spire's out in front, which is unusual. Usually they put them well back out of the way, because obviously if the Spire goes down by a bunch of Triple M just running here and here and sniping it, then that would be bad for his future production. But Baneling's Spires looks very likely to be a Mutaling build. It's a very old build from back in the Starcraft 2 days. Basically get a ton of Mutalisks, a ton of Zerglings, and then you morph a lot of them into the Banelings. Against Terran, it's a very good build. The Mutas snipe the tanks, and the Banelings take out all the Marines. And it's pretty much a to and fro action. You got to make sure that the Mutas get the tanks but stay out of the reach of the Marines, and you got to make sure that the Banelings don't run into the siege tank fire zone, because tanks will wipe out Banelings and Marines will wipe out Mutalisks. So the Terran's got a very good counter to Mutaling, but at the same time, if the Zerg plays his cards right, then Mutaling can prove devastating towards Marine tanks. So it's quite interesting. Terran's building a gold expansion up here. I'm not sure if I like that, because if he's going for tanks, then it's going to be hard to defend this. He can basically, these workers right here harvesting the gold are so wide open to Mutalisk attack, it's not even funny. Now he could park his army out here, but that's not in range enough for Zerglings and all that to run just in there. It's very, very hard to defend this expansion. What really helps is having a nice back here, right against the edge of the map, because the Mutalisk can't come in from there. They got to come up from here, and you place a couple of missile turrets on the bottom side, and a couple of missile turrets around here. Excuse me. And you've basically got the entire base fairly well defended from Mutalisks. But he hasn't done that, and he doesn't know about the center base, so we'll see what he does. He's going to go out there, and he is going to spot this command center floating over, so the Terran's being very aggressive with his expansions, and these Mutalisks have to watch out, but it is a brilliant move because he's managed to get all the Marines over there. So he can go in there, 6 or 7 Mutalisks. Probably was a good decision to run away from that missile turret. However, he's going to get shot to hell just getting out of here. So the missile turrets from the Terran player are very well set up in this case. They're guarding this base, they're guarding this base. But this base, he's seen it now, and I think he'll have to pull back from this base, because lift it up and get it out of there. If you lift it up straight away, no, see, it's gone. He's not paying attention, or maybe he's just saying, bugger it, you know, just leave that one. So that base just didn't last. But this one looks like it might last a little bit longer. He's got a nice wall in here. But with the amount of forces that the Zerg has, he's actually got quite a scary army in comparison to the Terrans. The Terrans have got a very good position here. The Zerglings are going to have a lot of trouble swarming around them. But numbers, in this case, is just going to be too much. And the Mutalisks... But here we go. Here's the reinforcements from the main base, and the Zerg. Oh, I think the Zerg's still fine. There was an extremely good Baneling hit there. Took out close to a third of those Marines, but the remaining Marine forces are going to chase that Zerg force off. And meanwhile, he's morphing in more Banelings here. He's constantly producing his army, and he's going to be able to put the pressure on the Terran player. He's got 1-1 so far. The air doesn't have any upgrades. The Terran has 1-1 on his infantry, nothing on the tanks. So it's pretty even as far as upgrades go. He's a little bit faster on the upgrades, the Terran player, because the Zerg player has only just started his level 2 armor. But we'll see. It's actually, the supply is extremely close as well. Terran's very slightly better in the economics, but not enough to really matter. So I don't know if these overlords saw the army and decided it was a good time to go in, but it's definitely what he's done, and he's definitely putting the hurt on the drones. This drone count is not... I can't tell if he killed a lot of drones or if the drone production just hasn't been going on, but he's well in the lead now. This is more than enough to counteract the mules coming down from the Terran player, but he is going to lose this base. Not a massive loss, because he got his harvesters out of there, and he's already was getting a fourth up there, so he can just put the drone straight across to there. He's basically lost the hatchery, a couple of other miscellaneous buildings, so it's not a huge loss. But he has to worry about these guys, and he's going in a little bit strong here. I'm not sure if I would have gone in that strong. He needs to send the Zerglings and the Banelings in at the same time. The Zerglings can soak up a bit more of these siege tank hits, and then the Banelings get in there and start taking out the Marines. And then the Muta army finishes off the tanks. But now he's got no... But he's picked a good time. He's got in there. Just as the siege tanks were starting to siege up, and that was beautiful timing. However, the reason he didn't wipe out the Terran army was because he didn't have the creep spread. You saw the Banelings, as soon as they left the creep, they just couldn't catch the Marines anymore. The Marines stimmed and ran back, and the Banelings just don't have the speed to catch stimmed up Marines when they're not on creep anymore. So he needs to work on this creep spread. He needs to push it out a lot more. The creep spread is pretty good here. So if there's an attack coming down from here, and this guy attacks the base from the east side, then the Zerg player will be in a pretty good spot. But, ooh, excuse me. But yeah, he needs to push that creep spread. He's going for the gold expansion here. Now, this is not necessarily going to be a bad idea, because one of the things that Zergs do really, really well is flanking attacks, and the Terran, in order to take this, has to go down into the middle area, has to go down this ramp, and leaves himself extremely wide open to a flank. So I don't know if he seriously means to mine off there, but even if that hatchery doesn't mine and the Terran gets drawn in there to take that out, if he gets this creep pushed up a lot more, that could be devastating for the Terran army. He could go half his forces in one side, half in the other side, and he could just do massive amounts of damage to the Terran player. But he has tech switched over to Ultralisks. It's not a bad option. Ultralisks do a lot of damage to Marines. The trouble is getting them in there And I've got to say, this Terran's control of his Marines is fairly good. The stim and run tactic, it does seem to be working quite well. What he needs to do is, right now he's got his Marines and his tanks on top of each other. He sieges up the tanks, and then when everybody comes in, he stims his Marines and then he runs back. And that's a great strategy, but unfortunately it leaves the tanks completely open in the front. Now, I have seen a few pro games where they do Marine tank, and this is what they do. They have the tanks at the back, they use the Marines to bait in the Zerglings, to bait in the Banelings, they stim and run back, and the Zerg chase them and then get blown away by the siege tanks. Now, he's pushing up a little bit too far, but then this army is very scary. I'd say pull back a little bit, wait till the Zerg stops chasing you, and then see if you can push the tanks forward a little bit, because the Zerg obviously isn't ready to push in completely, and it's very scary moving this tank ball. You just want to keep them there, keep them in the one spot, and of course the disadvantage for that is that the Mutalisks, if you don't keep your Marines close enough to the tank army, the Mutalisks can flank in from behind, start wiping out tanks very, very fast. But it does look like he's actually stopped going for Mutalisks at the moment. He's switched over to Ultras, and if we have a look at the tanks, they do a lot of damage versus armoured, so these Ultras are going to be very good versus the Marines, but he's getting a very, very scary tank army. That's 14 tanks, and if he keeps the Marines running interference between the Ultras, then I think he should do well. This was bad. The Zerg completely flanked him. He didn't have the tanks in a good position there. He moved a little bit too far in, and the Zerg just rushed in behind him. I was going to say, if he can manage to keep a buffer of Marines and Marauders in between the Ultras and the tanks, then he's going to do quite well. But he didn't manage to do that. He got flanked, and the Ultralisks really proved their worth there. And you can see the upgrades, 2 and 4. So these Ultralisks are turning into absolute beasts. And the Terran doesn't have a lot to counter this at the moment. If you look at the production tab, he needs to be building a lot more Marauders and a lot less Marines. Marauders are a beautiful counter towards Ultralisks. If you have 3 or 4 Marauders for each Ultra, you can just stop them dead. First of all, the slow attack from the Marauder stops the Ultralisk getting into range, and just the pure damage. I mean, that's double damage versus armoured. So enough Marauders just really wipe through the Ultralisks. But he's not producing the Marauders he needs. He's producing tanks, and that's still good. But Marines, a massive Marine army with a few Marauders, is not going to cut it too much against the Ultralisks. We'll see here, we've got a couple of Zerglings shutting down this base. So far, the Zerg has done excuse me, the Zerg has done a very good job of keeping this base not mining, of just shutting it down time after time after time. He has got a lot of minerals off it. It's starting to get very empty, but it has been shut down once again. If we have a look at the income, the Zerg player has been doing a massive amount of economic damage. No harvesters left, almost no harvesters left for the Terran player, so he's basically broke at the moment. So we'll see what he manages to do. The Zerg player is in a pretty good place. He's still mining this one. His attempts to get a 4th have been well, they haven't really worked that well. So the Terran's been quite good at shutting down the Zerg, but right now the Zerg has one more actual mining base than the Terran player. The Zerg has a full mining base here, and the Terran has this, but he's not getting the full amount that he needs. However, it looks like the Zerg player has GG'd the game, so he's I'm not sure why he did that, to be completely honest. He had a bit of bank. He could have built some ultras. I mean, the units, 8 marauders, so they're good, but I do believe that he could have built up his army again. He could have taken this down, combination of ultras and banelings and zerglings, could have worn down this army, and he could have afforded the number that he needed with this amount of minerals and gas. And the Terran was in a very bad place as far as economy goes. So I think the Zerg should have pushed in. He had just lost his hatchery there. He wasn't quite fast enough to save it, and maybe that was what ended the game for him. He said, "All right, I've lost this hatchery. I'm just going to say done." It's a hard push to get back from that, and it's not always going to work. So fair enough. He's just said, "All right, I'm done. Good game," and he headed off. And our Terran player is victorious. So good on you, Terran player. Very well done. And thank you very much for watching this video. And this has been Hairy Muppet casting this awesome StarCraft 2 game.